So some of the circumstances you talk about are probably very near and dear to the individuals appearing in court. We often see when people come to the counters, especially if they've never been in court before, which many haven't, they're very apprehensive and nervous, and I would say, frankly, scared.
Right.
And sometimes that comes out in different ways. Sometimes I perceive that individuals, we perceive that sometimes individuals may appear angry, but really they're just kind of scared. It's a new and somewhat scary process for people to navigate if they don't know what to expect.
So true.
We do talk about how to respond to that in our office. We try to, obviously we can't give legal advice, but we try to be as helpful as we can. I often tell my team that if people walk away feeling as if we representing the judicial branch, we're oftentimes the first people in the court system that the folks you're talking about run into, that experience and interact with. And I often tell my team, in addition to what we say, how we say it gives the impression of fairness and that we're dedicated, that we care about what we do and the work we do is important, and that we listen. So that's something I talk about frequently with my team. I would assume you probably see similar levels of stress. Again, people having never appeared in court before, coming in and things like their children, which are very dear to them. They're concerned about how
Right.
things might. I often tell my team, I think some people are concerned that they're going to lose their children. That's kind of
There's a lot at stake.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake.
Yes.
I was wondering, do you have any particular strategies that you utilize to kind of de-escalate those situations or deal with those, with that kind of apprehension that individuals may have in the courtroom?
It's actually a subject that has been kind of one of my passions in both practicing law for 24 years and being on the bench now for about 18 years. Is there was this a psychologist, a professor. I think he was originally from Minnesota. He may be, last I heard, he was teaching at Yale. His name was Tom Tyler, and he basically asked a very simple question: why do people follow the law? That was his area of interest. We know in a criminal setting, one thing that makes people follow the law is they can go to jail if they don't. But why do people follow family court orders? There's no police that are sitting there to enforce it. And what he discovered is that people tend to give legitimacy to the court, their willingness to abide by what the court says, when they feel they've been treated fairly. It's a very simple concept when you think about it. But when they feel they've been heard, they are more likely to live with the results. So that's the core principle that I base my approach on. But if I were to look at it and lay it out and say, what would be a good plan to ensure, whether it's a judicial officer, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a customer service person, it doesn't matter what role we all play, we're all interrelated in this big mission that we have. How does that person gain the understanding of why it's so important to make people feel they've been treated fairly? So the first step that I've been implementing is I take new judges. I also do this with law students. I take them over to the Law Library Resource Center, where they've never been there before. They are not familiar with family proceedings, and I give them assignments. So I might say to you, you were told by a police officer last night that you need an order of protection, and they told you to come down to this building, and now you walked in. Go get one. And for them to have what I call the litigant experience, you with your familiarity with the courts and your exceptional experience, you may still look at it and go, well, I've never done this before. I don't even know where I start. So you go up to the information desk and they point you in a direction and they send you over there, who sends you there, who then tells you to do this, who then tells you to do that. And we then start getting into the alphabet soup of family law. You need to get an OP. And we start speaking to them in acronyms. And if you're not familiar with that, even though you have expertise in the court system, you'd say, all right, I don't think I know what that means. So we start with getting them the litigant experience. What does it look like from your perspective? And then I ask them to take how that uncertainty made them feel, whether it made them feel inept or unfamiliar or maybe nervous. And then think about the fact that what I just sent you to do is a made-up scenario. You really didn't last night get told by law enforcement that you need an order of protection to make sure you're safe. And imagine how it feels for them. So we start with not this notion of saying to people, you need to have empathy, but to show them what empathy, where it comes from. It comes from being able to at least relate to the experience of someone else. Now, when they are in the courtroom, the next thing that I employ is something that really has to do with, very simply, respect. And I'm in a position where, not because of anything I've earned or anything that's based on my career, I'm in a position where I am apparently due respect because of the position I hold. It has nothing to do with me and whether I've earned it or not. When the governor appointed me and I walk in that courtroom and I'm in that elevated bench wearing that black dress, the institution of the court deserves to be respected. And what we saw years and years ago, and we see it again in, unfortunately, things like Judge Judy, is it's very one way. If you've ever watched Judge Judy, and by the way, that makes for good TV. It's not reflective of what's going on in the courts. But if we look at that, that's the way judges used to behave decades ago. This notion of they rule with an iron fist, and it's almost like that first scene when Dorothy goes to see the wizard and the scarecrow's knees are shaking and the cowardly lion is quivering and they're frightened. That's what it feels like for these people to appear in front of the great and powerful Oz. And we can rule out of fear, but that doesn't go very far, and it goes against procedural justice, the thing I started this long diatribe with, the notion of people feeling like they've been hurt. So it was very unnerving for me when I first got appointed to the bench that I'd walk in a courtroom and they'd say, all rise, and everybody was standing for me. And I thought for sure that I had a giant F on my forehead, meaning fraud. And like, why are they standing for me? Don't they know that I'm just me? And then one day it hit me. They are not standing for me. They're standing for the institution I represent. And if I respect that institution as much as I'm asking them to respect that institution, then I must give respect as much as I may expect to get respect. And that was the game changer for me when I had that revelation. When I walked into the courtroom and people stood, I realized it's not about me. My head didn't get any bigger than it might have already been. It was, these people are showing respect to an institution that I respect to my core. And therefore, I'm going to treat them the way this institution should reflect, which is a place of justice for all. And by showing people that respect, it makes all the difference. So I'm going to take it full circle now and maybe finally answer your question, which is, okay, how does that work in practice? So very early on my time on the bench, a federal judge who I knew and respected greatly said, hey, just a word of advice, be careful about threatening to hold people in contempt. And I said, okay, can you give me more? And he said, once you make the threat, you have to go through with it. If you threaten somebody and they don't change their behavior. Sure enough, within a month or two, before I could even stop the words from coming out of my mouth, somebody was in the back of the courtroom, was really lost it. And I said, sir, one more word out of you and I'm going to hold you in contempt. The first opportunity I had to follow that federal judge's advice, I violated it and thought, what do I do now? And I ended up letting him speak and get it off his chest. And I thought I have to have a better go-to move. And I came up with it, and it's one that's worked ever since. I've never even had to come close to saying to somebody, I'm going to hold you in contempt. In other words, a power play. That's all I'd be using when I'm threatening somebody, is my power, not the righteousness of what I'm doing, strictly that I have authority. Just because I have the right to do something doesn't make it right to do it. And I live by that. So I know when people have, and they have, I've done every assignment. I've been on criminal, I've been in juvenile court, I've spent my career mostly in family court. There are people who are quite upset. When they are accelerating, I say to them, and I'll experiment here and do it with you. Can I ask you a question? I don't mean to interrupt, but can I ask you a question? Yes. Have I been respectful to you today? And every time the answer has been, well, yeah. Well, in that case, I don't believe I'm entitled to more respect than you, but I think I'm entitled to the same respect as you. So can we have an agreement? If I am going to be respectful to you, may I expect the same in return? Every time so far, that has been successful. In some very hairy situations, I will tell you. Now, let's assume they say, no, I have not been respectful. No one has said that yet, but I am prepared for that as well. If they say, well, no, in fact, you have not been, then I say, in that case, I owe you an apology, because my goal is to treat everyone that comes into my courtroom with respect. And if I have fallen short with you, then I will do better. If I do better, can I ask you to do the same? So I'm prepared either way. And I will tell you that approach of diffusing the situation has served me far better than one more word out of you, I'm going to hold you in contempt. And it empowers other people to control their own behavior, but also to see that they are being treated with respect and that it does matter that they're there. And I just try to impart that combination of see what it's like to have a litigant experience, understand the value of making people feel heard, and not using my power as a sledgehammer over people, but rather to use it in a way that rises everyone's behavior up to a level where we can get something done.